Hey there. Before we start this episode, I wanted to jump into your ears straight away and let you know how you can support us best with this podcast so we can keep this going. So, the most important thing that when you have listened to this episode would be share, share, share. Spread the word, drop our name, drop us in the conversation. If you see a question popping up somewhere, say, the Damn Parenting Ladies, they have an episode on this. Pop the episodes out, get us into the conversation of the communities. This is the best way to support Eva and me. And give us a like on Spotify, give us a follow, jump over to Instagram, Damn Parenting Podcast. Make sure that you spread the word about what you like, why you like the episodes, and that you spread the knowledge that we are putting out there so it can be heard and received by everyone who needs to hear this. And this is what I just wanted to drop with you before now you can enjoy them chat or an expert episode. So let's see what's going to be on. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Damn Parenting, your English-speaking parenting podcast from Amsterdam. We are your hosts, Maren and
Eva.
And today we have another book club episode. So you know who we will be welcoming here, and it is Elizabeth. Hi.
Hello.
And today's book is a very long title that every time we try to read it, we get it wrong. So I will just read it off the script. The Book You Wish Your Parents Had Read and Your Children Will Be Glad That You Did by Philippa Perry. There we go. So what can we say about this book?
Yeah. So my book summary for this one was that the author, through exercises, advice, and anecdotes from her psychotherapist practice, addresses the way parents can be attuned to their child's needs to create a loving relationship. So that's kind of, if I had to sum up how the book is created and framed, that would be it. And my main takeaway is that you always need to repair after a rupture. And a rupture is a mistake or hurt that causes emotional damage or worry to your child. And then repairing can be difficult because we need to not be defensive and take a look at our own behavior, triggers, and baggage from how we were raised, which might not have been in a family that knew how to repair or address emotions. So that's what I thought. Like, if you had to sum up the book in like one paragraph to me, and you guys might have a different take on it, that was like kind of the summary. And I thought her second major point that goes with that was that we need to put feelings into words. So we really need to make sure that our kids understand what they're feeling and how to share what they're feeling. And we need to model that and we need to contain that for them. So different from the last book that we discussed, rather than like, here are the key points, I thought the book had a lot of like nuggets of wisdom, like a lot of things that she says throughout that really spoke to me and I underlined and starred. So I thought that I would actually kind of go through what I starred and read them out loud. And I have one section I want to read and one exercise I want to read. Then I thought that I would throw it back to you guys as well. So if there's other things that really stood out to you that I didn't cover, and then I'll have some questions at the end. And I will say, my little side note is that I read this when I was pregnant. And I found I had a much different impression of the book reading it a second time after my kid has been alive for more than a year. So I don't know if you two, was this the first time reading it for you, or have you read it before?
First time. I read it when I was pregnant. Yeah.
Was it the same for you or different for you? Or like now that you've been in it a couple of years?
It was just a confirmation again and a good reminder.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I have to say, the first time I read this book, and this is, I guess, my general impression of this book, jumping right into it, is that I find this book very, very, very useful for people who have never been in contact with any of these topics. I do find it for people who, like me, are coming from a background with coaching, psychology, really reading into communication and all these things, working with trauma and these topics, that I found myself nodding like, yes, all right, I know this. So for me, it wasn't such a big, oh my God, what? I have never heard of this, but more of like a confirmation of the things that I initially had already felt I want to do and I already had educated myself about. So I wanted to put this out there. When you read this book and you have a background in these topics, then it might not be the big newsflash for you. However, it is always a good reminder, because I don't think we can be reminded often enough, especially as parents, when things do get hectic and do get not patient and we lash out and we don't parent the way that we want to parent, then this is a good reminder of, hey, let's remind myself, I read this. This is something that I wanted to follow on.
And I think, like, similarly, I think that was my difference too, reading it. I felt like there was moments that made me almost have that like mom guilt, that like, oh, I'm not doing this right, or I didn't do it the right way, versus when I read it pregnant, when like, oh, who knows how you're going to do it. And then I thought about it, I'm like, I do think the book is written for people who have never, like you said, been around kids before, who have been living that life of very much like, it's about me and I go to work and I am an adult and kids are just a nuisance. And so that was a good reminder for me, like, I'm not that, like, so I think I gave myself some compassion. It was like, I do these things, and it's okay that they're not perfect, because that's the idea, right? You repair after a rupture. But I did have some moments, some sections that I was like, well, sometimes I need alone time. I don't want to give my child attention every second of the day. But it's like, if you think that the audience is more someone who isn't around their child at all, and they go to work and they come home and they're trying to cook dinner and their kid is like pulling on their pant leg, versus I'm with my kid almost all day long, and like, so that was my take to reading it again, was we're all doing a great job. So take these nuggets as like advice, but don't feel guilty as I start to read them. So I'll jump into that. So here are my nugget that I found, at least. Let me just find my start. So the core of parenting is the relationship you have with your child. You want it to be a source of strength. And I'm going to just say everything I read out loud is basically a quote from the book. So these are not my own words. Unpack what happened to you as a child and only put back what you need. Become more self-aware of the discomfort of our childhood to be more mindful of what we pass on. And I like that she points out some people had really great childhoods. If we take the modeling received in a really positive relationship, like use that, like keep that piece, and then we have to let go of the stuff that we don't want. Try not to pass that on. Naming our inconvenient feeling to ourselves and finding an alternative narrative for them, one where our kids aren't responsible, means we won't judge our kids as being at fault, then less likely to act out that feeling at the expense of our kids. So that's kind of a big one. So I thought maybe I'd pause there. What did you guys think that meant? Like, what is she trying to say there? Did that piece speak to you at all when you read it?
Can you read that again?
Yeah.
It's actually quite a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
The first question I was like, okay. And then the second part came in.
Yeah, exactly. So naming our inconvenient feeling to ourselves and finding an alternative narrative for them. So for example, like, I'm being really annoyed because she's pestering me. That would be my inconvenient feeling, is annoyance. Right? Where can we change that narrative so that our kids aren't responsible, which means we won't judge our kids as being at fault. Therefore, we are less likely to act out at the expense of our kids. So if my feeling is annoyance, right?
Yeah.
And what am I actually annoyed about? It's not my child and what they're doing, their behavior. It's maybe that I'm really tired and it's been a long day and they want my attention because it's been a long day that I haven't been with them and I've been working. So I have to stop and look at what I'm feeling instead of looking at what the kid is doing that's causing that feeling, right?
Yeah. I think we can be, as adults, I mean, not so much for children, but we are responsible of our own feelings. So what I take away from this is that when I do react annoyed or loud or short or whatever it is, the way that I don't want to react is tuning in and be like, I have not sat down. I'm thirsty. I'm hungry. Like, I'm overstimulated. I really check what is my need. What do I need to react in the way that I want to react? Patient, compassionate, empathetic, on the same eye level, explaining, educate, like these things that I do the way that I want to parent. So, but my child is not responsible for reminding me, hey, mom, you need to sit down and eat a piece of bread. I'm responsible for that. And so really trying to focus back on, and also cut yourself some slack, and knowing that this is hard and letting go of this narrative that, and I think this is also true for both parents, for people who do have a paid work outside of the house job, where they might feel guilty that they can't be spending time with their children and then they are annoyed by or stressed by that. But also for the people who are home with their child all the time, that it's okay that it's hard, and it will be hard in whatever position you're in, because parenting is hard, and acknowledging that and not falling into this false narrative of I can have it all and I'm just failing at it and other people can do it all. And I shouldn't be stressed because I'm home all day. So what's my stress here? Mm-hmm. So it's like really acknowledging the load that is on everyone's plate and feeling okay with the feeling that it's hard. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Eva, do you have any thoughts on
Yeah, one of the things about, like, so to add on to what Maren said is, like, it really is also, and from birth, it was always like, did I drink water? Did I eat food? Have I slept in reality? But the one thing to add on to that was also the fact that when I get triggered, the thing is, it was also something in my head of how was it when I did this when I was a child, and what was the reaction back? And that was always the thing in my head was, yeah, if you didn't put your toys away, like, what happened to you as a child? And if your child is doing the exact same thing and you're trying to break these cycles, then it's a case of you quickly revert back to how it was for you, and you don't want that. And it's so easy to slip there, and it's so hard not to. And so depending on how tired you are and how everything we've just discussed, that's the thing. And that's where, the guilt comes in, because you're like, I should have been able to manage myself better with that. When the reality is like, no, you're tired. You know, there's flexibility in a lot of parenthood. And unfortunately, some of that flexibility also goes to this, where you don't want it to be flexible. But unfortunately, no one's perfect, and no one's going to be hydrated and slept well and everything else, that they will be able to manage this.
Yeah.
Also coming back to the title, knowing that we might have not been parented ourselves in that way. So we need to learn now, how do we do this? We need to recognize it, and then we need to change it. And this is then this extra step that, is effort and is work. And we need to practice until it becomes a habit that we automatically do. But in order for automatism to work, we need to practice.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you guys you made me think of two things. So one was, I was actually going to read this exercise anyways. So there's on page 24 of my copy, there's an exercise at the top that says looking back with compassion. So to what Eva said, the exercise is ask yourself what behavior in your child triggers the strongest negative response in you. What happened to you as a child when you demonstrated that same behavior? So that's the only exercise I'm going to read from the book, but there's a lot of them throughout. And I just thought that to me was in the beginning of the book, and it really spoke to me, because I do think so much of this is I wasn't raised in a way I would have wanted to be raised. And so where are those little triggers coming from that, that she's going to hit on, and I have to think about, like, is this a normal way to react, or is this how my parents reacted? And like, where's the happy medium? And then the second piece I thought of from the book, you guys keep using these I statements, right? Like, I'm thirsty, I'm tired. And so she has, again, the other biggest section of the book I like is towards the end. It's all about behavior, and we'll get there. And when she's talking about behavior, she says, use I statements. And she says specifically, just like, we learn to do that in our adult relationships, like with conflict, but with our kids as well, when we're setting up boundaries, to really say what our feeling is from that I statement, so that we're modeling that to them. So that's that way of showing them what the emotion looks like and how to speak about it. But we're also setting up the boundary. And that made me feel really good, because there's parts of it that I felt like I'm not supposed to leave my daughter. Like, I'm supposed to always be with her. And then she gets to this place, like, it's okay to set up boundaries. And you say, like, I'm really tired right now and I need a 5-minute break. So you're going to play with your toys for 5 minutes while I sit on the couch and look at my book. And that's a boundary. And then you keep that boundary. And it might not be easy for your child to learn that right away, but you're showing them how you can make a boundary of time for yourself and for your needs. So I think that that's really important, that it's not about like, I'm here for you and I'm going to sacrifice everything because you're my child. It's about everyone having these healthy boundaries and understanding each other's emotions.
And also communicating to the child that they are not responsible for this. Yeah. So when I lash out, and this is coming back to the whole repair after rapture thing, when I do react in a way that I don't want to react, I say, oh man, I'm super sorry. I was so annoyed. I was so stressed. I didn't take care of myself good enough today. So I'm very sorry. And explaining why it happened. So my daughter knows it's not her fault that I feel that way. And she can also then maybe for herself, I mean, she's only 4, so maybe, but down the road, then also adapt this behavior of like, okay, what's going on with me? How can I communicate this to make the other person understand why it is the way it is? So like fostering compassion then also.
And this was even in my teaching profession, it was a big piece that started to come into education as well. This, like, you're not the all-knowing teacher. Really important to practice this as well in the classroom. So like as a teacher, if I made a mistake or if I got something wrong or if I lashed out because kids were behaving like crazy, I had to also learn that process of stopping and saying, you know what, guys, my voice raised there. I didn't want it to, like, this is why that happened. So I was modeling that to the kids, even in education. And so I think that's why this book spoke to me, because I had to learn that in my education practice. You know, I didn't learn that from life. So I think that there's a book for parents to also realize we're gonna make mistakes. Like, we're gonna make them all the time, but like, how do we discuss those mistakes? How do we own up to them? How do we show that we can make it better? You know, like, that to me is the biggest piece of this book that I think is the most important. Some other things. So I'm going to go back to my nuggets. We'll see how they go. Your child will bring up your baggage on a body level, no matter what. So that comes back to that trigger idea. So we feel it in our body, like it's trapped inside of us and we don't know how that's going to come out sometimes, right? So again, that repair. Cooperate and collaborate. Don't compete. Again, this idea that we can problem solve together. You are not like against your child. You are working on this with your child or your family. Acknowledge, validate, and take seriously your child's feelings. She adds on, be a container for your child's emotions. Again, I was a super sensitive kid. I just was like crying all the time. I just had the big feelings all the time. So, and I got a lot of like, don't cry me a river, you know, like, you're so sensitive, like, get over it. So like, that just spoke to me so much. Like, we really need to validate our kids' feelings, whatever they are. Might not make sense to us as adults, but like, that's what they're feeling.
I think one of my notes here was children aren't the problems that are to be fixed, or they're not our problems that we have to fix, as it were, but they are actual individuals to be understood and supported, and mutually respectful relationship. And I think that's also an issue that we have in this day and age, is people are like, oh, you're being so like hippie nearly, like with your kid, is like you're treating them like an adult. Because I think most of us brought up in the 70s, 80s and 90s, you were not, you know, it was, you were in an authoritative relationship with your parents where they were just telling you what to do because that's their job. You're a child, you have no voice, that's it. And so nowadays it's a case of, we have a bit more time. The world is very different to how it was when we grew up. And now we realize through research as well, is actually we need to give that respect to the child and to give them that time, that energy and their voice. And so I think that was also the thing for me with this book.
Definitely. Yeah. One of her other things was we want to be felt rather than dealt with. So I think that goes with what you're saying as well, right?
Yeah.
They're not a thing to just be told what to do. Like, you know, they want to be felt, how they're feeling. So she says to observe the behavior and follow your child's flow, right? So like, what's going on with them? Like, I think that's kind of Montessori as well, right? Just like sit back, observe, see what they're doing, let them do it. Instead of view childcare as an investment in my child. So again, I'm in that toddler stage right now, right? Where my kid is not completely verbal yet. So there's lots of tantrums. So I think a lot of stuff that spoke to me on the second reread was just like, wow, like the days are still long. There's like a lot of big feelings. How do you communicate when your kid can't communicate back with you yet? So a lot of the things I'm starring and stand out to me is like that sort of like, hey, this is just the stage we're in right now. And there's ways to get through it, but we're investing in a future relationship where we can like talk about these things and deal with these things. So it's going to be okay.
For many more years.
Yeah, always also just asking ourselves, and this also comes back what Eva just said, of going back from the really letting this idea go of the children are dumb and we're the adults and we know it better and we know how the world goes and we can educate them about everything, or we tell them how the way is. And just tuning in with ourselves and picturing someone who's constantly telling us that we're doing it wrong, we're not good enough yet, and don't even touch this because I'm going to do it better for you. So like this feeling of powerlessness would, even talking about it, I get ragey. So it's like, of course, what is my child going to experience if I would even get ragey if someone constantly tells me how I'm not doing things good or how I'm not able to decide what's good for me or how I can voice myself. So really asking myself, how would I feel? And then apply this to the child. And also one big thing though is that, of course, our children don't know everything and they can't oversee a situation, and we do need to parent them, but then explaining and having the conversation and telling them why we choose to do certain things a certain way and why it's important to us. And as soon as we communicate this importance for us, we raise the the way that they accept it. Like we raise the acceptance. If we communicate the why and the how, then we can, raise the openness to acceptance, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think that'll bring me to then I'll read. There is one section I want to read that's a bit longer section. So it's in the behavior section, which is in the back of the book. And I'm going to be reading from page 172, kind of a little bit all over the place. But this spoke to me because again, I have a child that is nonverbal, and I'm putting in air quotes for those who can't see me. All behavior is communication. So behind behavior, you'll find the feelings. Once you discover the feeling behind any particular behavior and empathize with it, then you can put the feeling into words. You will help a child use words to express themselves, and they will have less need to act out on that feeling. Traditionally, it was thought that you must not let children get their own way. Parents seem to fear tantrums so much that even to not notice one, they think, will mean that a child will never grow out of having them. In this don't let them win game that parents play, there are no winners. There is only manipulation rather than relating to each other. The game is not real. It is something parents make up. Such an approach is based on a fantasy of what will happen in the future rather than what is working in the present. So if it's not about winning and losing, what is the best way to think about helping a child behave appropriately and conveniently at any one time? Generally, going with what works in the present, which is grounded in reality rather than what you fear may happen in the future, based on fantasy, it is a useful maxim to live by with children. So that's a big section. It's about 2 pages. But again, that spoke to me because this idea that, it was coming up here in our household that like if she's having this tantrum and I give in to what she wants or she needs, that means she's going to become this child who is just going to have tantrums to get what she needs. And I really needed to read that section at that time because she points out like live in this moment. Don't worry about, I'm creating a child who in the future is going to be demanding. Like, no, your child doesn't have the words yet. Like, of course she's going to have a meltdown because of, whatever the case may be, whatever happened in that situation. But if I start to figure out what the behavior means and speak to it and say, you're feeling this right now because this happened, then in the future, she can have that language. And then I can have that boundary to say, no, you're not going to have ice cream right now because it's dinner time. You can have ice cream after dinner or you can have it on the weekend, So like, it won't be, she's going to get the ice cream because she's having a tantrum and a meltdown. Like that's that future fear, right? So I just thought that was really an important piece of the book is that we're looking at the behavior as a piece of communication towards their feelings, and we are going to address their feelings.
Yeah, for me, it was a case that when you're saying that, it reminds me of the fact that parents fear the tantrum, but also parents fear other people judging them being, you're being manipulated. I despise the word. And it's like, you're saying a toddler is manipulating me. And it's like that their brain does not compute that way.
They don't know what their nose is. They're not plot a big manipulation thing of like, if I do this now, then in 10 years, I will always get my way. Like, no.
And there's also that thing of needs versus wants. It's a case of, as you said, with an ice cream, there's a want there where a need is, I need to connect with you. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that for me is always like, okay, what is the underlying effect here? And it's like, you want to, and just like you said, and we've already discussed in previous conversations, there's a case of, if they want an ice cream and it's kind of like it's 3:00 and it's raining outside and it's like, are you kidding me? And it's kind of like, at the end of the day, what does it do in the big scheme of things? We live in the moment, we live in here and now. And you know what? There are going to be some days where we should just say yes and give in to them because it makes them it lightens them up. It lifts them up. It elevates them. And you get to see that in your child. But you also still have to have a boundary of this isn't happening every day. And this is not going to happen at 5:15 when we have dinner in like 15 minutes, But there is that thing that, it's just the manipulator word to me is really, I don't know if it's like a trigger or something, but I really get so offensive when people are like, she's manipulating you again. And I'm like, no. It's like she asked me for a peach after dinner, after she's had 16 servings of whatever it is now. And she's still hungry. You know what? My child's growing. And if she wants a 17th serving of the next food, you know what? she has to also learn about that. So,
Yeah. And also on the flip side of that too, like one thing that I've been reminding myself when we talk about our triggers is like, why does her crying bother me? Or like, why does her having a meltdown bother me? And I think even just conversations recently with my mom, she's like, oh yeah, like I would throw you in your room when you were crying. Like, I kept coming up this idea of like, and I'm like, oh, this is one of those things, or like crying really bothers me. Like that's a trigger. And so I want to stop it. And no matter what, I have to stop it. And so I'm actually trying to be okay in that space of like the uncomfortable meltdown, to make the boundaries. It's like, okay, you're feeling really upset. Like you're feeling really upset because you can't have your stuffy right now, or you're feeling really upset because whatever. And I hear you and I see you, but you're not going to get your stuffy right now because we're going outside, like, or whatever. Like, so I'm trying to like, be like, I don't have to turn it off. I don't have to turn it off because crying is okay. It's a communication. I just have to get to what she's trying to communicate, So
it's the whole concept of not suppressing the feeling, but really solving it. Like, it's not about like the feeling of processing it. Yeah. Processing the feeling instead of suppressing it, because the feeling is there. And if we suppress it, then this is why we're having this conversation, and we're sitting here 30 years later and asking about the triggers. This is where they come from, because we have feelings that were not processed but suppressed, and then they will find their way out and probably at a situation that's not convenient to us.
It actually reminds me of the fact that like when we're talking about tantrums and you're like, oh, the fear of like your kid having a tantrum, like the thing is adults have what we call meltdowns. And the thing is you go, oh, you had a meltdown, and you just place that on them of, oh, you had a meltdown. And it's kind of like when a kid has a tantrum, that's annoying. Whereas when you have a meltdown, it's a different mindset because you're an adult, so you know better. And it's like, well, actually, it's more or less the same. You just didn't know how to communicate it. You maybe weren't taking care of yourself. There's things that are additional in that.
And so you brought me again to another key point that I starred. So she wrote, to behave, the following conditions must be met. And so she's making the point that these are not things that kids, especially young kids, can do yet. So I'm not saying them in the sense like your kids should be able to do this. This is just the thing someone at some point in their life has to learn to be able to behave. They need to be able to tolerate frustration. They need to be flexible. They need to have problem-solving skills, and they need the ability to see and feel things from other people's point of views. So she points out that developmentally, kids hit these things at all different points. So there isn't like suddenly like 18 months, your kids can do these 4 things. Like they're going to be a huge spectrum of when kids will be able to learn these things. And our brain develops until we're 25. So there's going to be some people who may never even get to these places, So I think that was really good for me to hear as well, because toddlers are definitely not at the tolerate frustration space, are we
ever?
Age. Yeah, right. Like, yeah, exactly. And like having empathy and being able to see from other people's point of view, that's like such a hard skill to learn as well, And so when we think like, oh, my child is misbehaving in a restaurant and they're like 3 years old, it's like, well, they're not misbehaving. They don't know these skills yet, right? Like they have to learn all of these skills together to get to that place. Like,
and that's societal pressure as well, because it's like, no, if you go to a restaurant, you're expected to act like this.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. And on that note, when you're in the restaurant, she writes, reflect rather than react, and don't take it personally. Breathe.
Oh, God.
Right? Because it's just so much. You're thinking, oh, what, they're looking at me. I'm a bad parent. I'm this, I'm that. It's like, we can just sit there for a minute, take a couple deep breaths, like do your box breathing, whatever, and be like, I'm going to reflect what's going on. What am I observing? What do I see? What is my child feeling? I don't need to react right away. Like, can just take that step back and like think about it. And then, also
know that these people you're sitting with in a restaurant, you're probably never going to see in your life again. So
yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Same on a flight. Like, okay. And it's really, I have really learned in these situations, because in the beginning, I was also like always then not looking inside and looking to my child, but I was so occupied with looking on the outside. Like literally I was holding her and then like not even looking at her, but like, how is everyone reacting around me? It's like, no, this is not the point of view I should be having. I should look to my child, to me. I don't care about these strangers around me. If they think I'm a bad parent, whatever, they can go on with their day, but I can get the connection with myself and with my child and not worry about what coon 3 tables above, like in front of me, thinking about me.
Right, exactly. My last nugget, and then we'll open up some more questions, was just all children need love and boundaries, not one or the other. And so this is where she says, state a boundary calmly and firmly. So I cannot allow you to like in terms of safety. So if they're climbing up and over something, I cannot allow you to climb on this right now because it is not safe for your body. And we're going to go over here instead. Again, this is like, we're not just going to let them do whatever they want. We still have to make sure that they're safe and that they're learning, but we're going to explain why.
To that point, one thing I did read, I think it was a bit of research a while ago, was when you're telling a child and you're like, don't do this, or you cannot do this. The thing is, the kid can't hear the don't part. You like literally are having a whole sentence at a child. They're not going to hear the part. So what you do is you give them an alternative, which is like, instead of don't do this, is like, hey, do this. There's that kind of way of kind of managing, I guess.
Yeah.
I forget it when I'm needing it, but I mean, there.
Yeah. I think in her example where the I cannot let you part, it was something like if your kid is like biting another kid or something. So it's like those very extreme, like I cannot allow you to bite another child. So I'm going to remove you from this play area right now. Like, so those are those extremes. But yeah, in the like other situation, like if they're, I don't know, like give me an example.
Don't climb up on the kitchen counter.
Yeah, so on that, it can be like, we're going to climb on the climbing cushion instead. Like, let's climb on the climbing cushion would be an example of what you're saying. Like, let's use the positive. Which, again, that's another education thing, too, is that we want to state the positive behavior we want to see from the kid rather than the negative, because when you use negative examples, you're teaching them the negative examples. So whenever we talked about behaviors in classrooms, it was we put the scissors safely in the scissor box rather than don't run with the scissors, because then the kid's going, run with the scissors. So you want to tell them what you want them to do to show and model that behavior, right?
Don't ask them the question, can you put the scissor in the box? The answer is no. And you already have the next problem.
Which is something that also at least it's from my readings and stuff too, is a very like white people culture thing where we like do things as questions all the time, like this, like can you do this? Da, 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 da. And it's actually meant as a directive. It's like this kind of like this passive aggressive thing, that like people have learned. So again, it's like an unlearning for me, is like, that's how I was raised, to like stop asking it as a question, because it's not a question. Like, state firmly, this is what I want you to do. This is what I need you to do, and like what the positive thing is. But yeah, I'm constantly doing it all the time, like to my husband, to my child. It's always a question, and I'm like, no.
Only ask a question. Only ask a question if you're okay with a no.
Yeah.
That's it. That's my baseline rule. If I'm okay with a no, then I can ask a question. If I'm not okay with a no, then I'm like, why would I ask a question? Because what is this communicating also to my child? I'm not listening to you.
Yeah.
Because she would be like, well, just ask me. So I'm giving you an answer, and then you're just like completely ignoring this and doing the opposite of what I just wanted. So this is then teaching them that they're not in tune with their feelings. They're not entitled to their feelings, and they don't have any say. So
yeah, it's managing that, because it's like saying, hey, Elizabeth, what do you want to do today? I want to go bungee jumping. It's like, no,
we go to the library.
Right? Exactly. Like, meltdown.
Exactly.
That made you very frustrated, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Let's connect here. What is this triggering in me, and what is it triggering in you, and how is this going to be affording your therapy in 30 years?
But
exactly.
Also to the listener who's listening to this is exactly what we also want to transport with this episode, that take this lightly, make it fun. Don't make this another chore on your list, and don't beat yourself up if you have communicated in a way that wasn't ideal. Like, communication is about connection, is about fun. So we can laugh about these things, and make it light for yourself, because if it's light, then it's attractive, and then you're more drawn to do it. So I hope this conversation was a light conversation where we can laugh about these things and we can make jokes about them. So we feel like, yes, this is something that we can approach with a light heart.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point too, because that's how I kind of touched on it my second time reading it. I was feeling a lot more like shame, like, oh God, like, and I did this and I did that. Like, they do have a whole, like, I feel like the author, without naming it, has a bit more of an attachment parenting style. And I just personally, for me, that's not my style. And so there's a lot of stuff that she's kind of like, never leave your child doing this, and make sure that you're always paying attention here, and I kind of started feeling like, well, mama needs a break. I think that too, of like, if somebody is reading this book rather than just like listening to our episode, like, she's not God, like, take the pieces from the book that really work for you, and don't make yourself feel guilty on top of everything else. Like you just said, like, this is just like a place to start start with how can I look at what my child is saying and how can we repair when it goes wrong? And I think let's not make ourselves feel more guilty. But I know you guys have done the mom guilt episodes already. Like let's not add
forever.
Yeah, right.
I mean, overall, what was your thoughts then of this book?
I thought I still really enjoyed the behavior section. Like, I think the end for me is still totally worth a read. I think some of the exercises, thinking about like the one I read, like our own childhood, what triggers us, just to like have that in our brain so we already know, I think are still really good. But I thought some of the baby stuff, that's what I found interesting, because it's like I read it when I was pregnant, and then she has like a whole pregnancy baby section. And I'm like, maybe because I'm past that phase and so I can't go back to it. I just felt like, okay. Like, this is a bit extreme. Like, really, like, so it lowered my estimation of the book, I will say. But that's me. That's my parenting style. Some people could also be like, this is the jam. Like, I totally feel this way. And I, of course, don't have an example right in front of me, but.
What did you think, Maren? Like,
yeah, I think it is a good reminder. And I think it's something that we can always pick up and read to either confirm or just remind ourselves. So I would give it like a solid 3.5
out of 1,500 or
out of 5. So I would give it like a 3.5 out of 5. I'd say.
Yeah. I think same. Yeah, 3.3 to 3.5.
It hits like the good solid middle ground.
Yeah.
For me personally, I mean, it's not a light read. And honestly, I wrote down, like, I don't think I could have finished it between the ages of 6 months and 3.5 years because quite a heavy text. And it's a tough read, but it's also because of those exercises, like you pointed out. They are scattered throughout the whole thing. And it does involve you basically journaling, home therapy sessions, but as it were. So it is like a mini therapy book for yourself to sit down, realize, gain insights, clearly name things that have until now existed, but without your awareness, as it were. So the thing is, like, that's the tough part for me. There was also so much for me between like the 6 months and 3.5 years. I basically was surviving like during that period. So I think for me, this book, I think I would assume it's probably best to read it when pregnant or in the first 6 months personally, because I just did not have time in the last, like, this is why it's my first time reading it. So yeah, I think I'm actually going to agree with a 3.5, I guess. I did see on Goodreads, because I'm always going to now refer to Goodreads for this DamGoode Book Club. And I did see that they had 4.1 out of 5.
Wow.
And I saw Ball.com and Amazon also had, I think it was like 4.3, 4.4 as well. I like the book, but exactly as Maren said at the very beginning, it's more or less stuff you kind of already know if you have any idea of psychology or communications. Also, like what you were talking about, where we're kind of thinking about how we were raised and reflections. And it's also a case of you don't want to read this book and feel guilty. Like we're like, oh my God, like, I don't want to read a book that makes me feel like that. So there is a bit of give and take. But as you say, I mean, like, I think I didn't find it in Obeya, and I think it was on Kindle. So the thing is, you can just download it on iBooks or whatever and just go to that behavioral section. You can skip the rest.
Yeah, just go there. And I think that would be a good, like you said, like when you're pregnant and expecting a kid, it's like a good thing to think about. And then I think the other good reader might be if you're in that place where there's like a lot of ruptures happening in your life. Maybe you've got an older kid now, like maybe she's got sections about teenagers, and you're just like, what is going on? Like, why are we not on the same page? Like, what's happening? It might be a good book to read if you've never read it, or a refresher at that point, because obviously the communication, the feelings are off between you and your kid at that point. So it could be like a place to like, I have some time to sit and think about what's going on, like I have some time to observe. That could be a good place for it too, I think.
And it also can be a good place in your parents' bookshelf.
Yeah.
It is, I have to say. I mean, it is a great book to read for yourself, but also to give to your Oma and Opa, so to your parents. So because your child hopefully will be around them if you have a good relationship with them. So you do want to, maybe if you don't want to do all this explaining of when they come to you, like, oh, you're getting manipulated. Why are you doing this? We haven't done this. We didn't do this. And you grew up fine, right? So it's like, so this, I think it is something that can start a good conversation, or you can use this book if you don't want to do all the explaining why you're doing the parenting you do. This is a great Christmas gift or a birthday present. to your in-laws or your parents, because they are unfortunately the generation that should be doing a little more of this kind of book reading.
Yeah, exactly. And I was going to say, so like we didn't get a chance to do this in the last book club, but like as a read alike, if you will, if this book isn't speaking to you, and I didn't choose this for our book club, but I still think it's a great book. It's How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, and Listen So Kids Will Talk. So she actually discusses this book in the book you wish your parents had had. So she uses it as a reference, and it's a classic, like it's from the 80s. So it's still around. The reason I didn't choose it for the book club is because her examples are from the 80s, and she talks a lot about hitting children and what to do instead, which people knew that information, but it's not like an issue the way it was in the same way, 40 years ago. So it's like kind of weird. You read some of the sections and you're like,
maybe it needs a new editing.
Yeah, I think it might need, but it's funny because they keep updating it, but they don't. And I mean, there are families who still use corporeal punishment. So I mean, maybe it still needs to be in there, but her lesson is the same thing, right? We repair after a rupture, and here's ways to talk to our kids where they're actually being heard. So it's another book you could try. You want to speak to this sort of how can I deal with behavior and communication and emotion, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, and Listen So Kids Will Talk by Adele Faber and Elaine Maslish.
You are making me laugh though, because you're saying how to talk to your kids so that they're going to listen, but also slap them.
Yeah, right. Well, that's
if they don't listen. Slap them.
Yeah, exactly. The book is we don't do this, and this is why, and here's what to do instead. So it's
Maybe it's her way of a sensory shock, when you hold an ice cube or you smell something very strong.
So this is Pavlov's theory.
Yeah. No, and I just want to be clear, she's very much against it. But it's just funny, you read some of the examples and they're very old school. So that's why I didn't suggest it as a book club.
Yeah, it is a popular book though. Yeah. I mean, it is a popular book that a lot of people have read because people do talk about it quite a lot still on the buy and sell group. So
yeah, it's a good one.
Any final words?
Not for me. So anything from you guys? Any thoughts I didn't cover? Or?
I read a comment about this book that someone said it's for parents who not only love their children but want to like them too. And that kind of made me laugh because I was kind of you have to love your family because they're your family, but you don't have to like them. And it's that kind of thing that I want to be the parent that my child is going to want to come back to me and talk to me. And I said to Maren before we started recording, someone said something along the lines of the best relationship you can have is when your kids become adults, they still want to spend time with you. And that's what I'm aiming for, really, I guess.
Yeah. And I think she says that in the book. I think that it's one of the exercises or something too, is to think about what do you want your relationship to look like in 20 years? How do you hope that looks like? Or somebody did recently and it's in my brain, but I think that's at least all three of us here. It's definitely our goal. Right. So
the next book is going to be Right Brain Child.
The Whole Brain
Child. Left and right, the whole.
I'm trying to find it to make sure I had the title right, but it's not there. So yes, The Whole Brain Child is.
And it's, is that Daniel Siegel? Is that it? Yeah. So it's Daniel Siegel. And so that's going to be the next book that we're going to be reading. And that'll be out on the first Monday of August. So guys, read the book with us, come up and listen to the episodes and hit us up on Instagram and have a chat with us. Let us know what you think. What do you rate it today? So on average, we've kind of rated it a 3.5 as it were for this book. If you guys have any opinions on it, if you have a higher or lower, we'd love to hear your insights because, we're taking 3 different individuals' insights, but we'd like to know more from our community. So do send us a message on Instagram to let us know what you thought of this.
And if you want to catch more episodes from us, every Wednesday, we are coming out with an expert episode. Every Monday, we're coming out with a Damn Chats, or like today with the DamGoode Book Club. And if you want to support us, share, like, and subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you give us a 5-star rating so we get seen by other parents and people who this information that we put out there is relevant for. Share these episodes, spread the words. If you come across any questions in WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups, check if we have an episode on this topic and bring it into the conversation so we get seen and recognized by other parents who we can help on this parenting journey, which is hard and long, and we can all work together to make it a little bit easier on ourselves. If you want to reach out to us, do it on Instagram, Damn Parenting Podcast, and we will hear you on the next episode. Thank you so much.
Bye.